Greetings all and welcome back to DWP 2022. We're in episode 13, where we're going to talk about the Africa Union Commission, AUC. Last episode 12, we spoke about the Africa Union itself. So the Africa Union Commission is in fact the government of the Africa Union. That's what drives everything. So established in 2001 in Addis Ababa, which Addis Ababa, as you know, is the headquarters of the Africa Union. So the Africa Union Commission is headquartered in Addis. And in 2001 was the first year they operated as the government of the Africa Union. So the Africa Union Commission, as the government, has a sister institution, the Africa Union Development Agency, or NEPAD. It's been renamed Africa Union Development Agency, NEPAD. So the two of them, the AUC and AUDA NEPAD, constitute the top echelons, the two institutions who are really basically the civil service of the Africa Union. But the Africa Union Commission, or AUC itself, has got a fairly elaborate structure. But as an introduction, I mean, we're trying to see how far we are going towards a union government, an Africa Union government down there, as envisioned by the Pan-Africanist philosophy of a united Africa. The reason being, the whole season of 2022, the DWP theme is whoever controls Africa runs this world. And we have run all these episodes up until now, episode 13, to get to a point where we now say the Africa Union Commission and AUDA and NEPAD are the instruments, the primary instruments, to drive African unity, to drive Pan-Africanism, to drive all the desired futures that Africans dream of. And today we're going to examine how far in 20 years, since 2001, how far has the Africa Union Commission delivered, and how far are we getting towards African unity, and how are we revamping and strengthening brand Africa in the process? So that's basically what we're going to do today. So in episode 12, there are a number of key conclusions that we arrived at, which are important in this conversation. First was that the pace of integration and unity in Africa, of course, it's been a bit slow. But also the extent to which member states commit to decisions made by the Africa Union is still pretty low, which on one hand is disappointing because it slows down integration. But on the other hand, we concluded that the AU actually does have the mechanism in place in the form of the Africa Union's Court of Justice. That mechanism does have a protocol in place already that if it really did want to ensure that legally all member states would commit to the decisions of the AU, that would happen. So maybe it's a matter of time. The third thing we concluded was that the regional economic communities, the RECs, have been agreed indeed as the main vehicles to drive integration. However, progress has been slow in that regard, but there is some progress. We also noted in the episode 12 that the Africa Union itself, especially the Commission, is committed to go on a reform agenda to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Once again, it's a work in progress. In the area of peace and security, we found that a lot more progress had been made, and that even commitment to the budget has improved, although Africa is still largely dependent on its former colonial masters for peace and security. Then we also found that within the 20 years of the Africa Union, there is a massive improvement in the financing of the Union. There's greater autonomy, almost total autonomy in financing the core budget, and then still sharing with the development partners on programs. The dialectic still remains, however, as to whether the African Union itself and the Africa Union Commission and those structures represent a true African circumstance or circumstances and opportunities, or rather it's still very much just trying to copy some principal elements of the European Union. So once again, it's something that I think can be interrogated deeply. The other issue that surfaced in the last episode is that the Africa Union and the Africa Union Commission themselves are positively conscious of the fact that there's need for greater participation, popular participation by Africans in matters of the Africa Union and Africa Union Commission. So not just the regular African citizens, but also those in diaspora. And then finally, it also turns out that probably the single most important area that we need to see transformation urgently, that is overall social and economic transformation, seeing a dynamic African economy. Progress is a bit slow. So all this, as we went through this in the last episode, goes all the way back to our theme to say, therefore, how are we doing in the ability of Africa Union and Africa Union Commission and AUDA NEPAD to have an Africa that controls its resources and is positioned to be a massive, largest manufacturer in the world after China, and to be able to actually see Africa being the next superpower after China and US. We liked the idea in the last few sessions, actually. We liked the idea that although the Organization of African Unity did not do much for African unity, but rather just decolonization, the Africa Union Commission, when it set off in 2001, there was greater commitment. Then the AU itself showed great drive towards accelerating the pace of Pan-Africanism and unity. But somehow, 20 years later, it looks like that has slowed down a bit. And I think it's an issue for concern, and we need to go back to that issue in this whole season. So, whilst it's generally appreciated that the philosophy of accelerated incremental gradualism is in place, somehow there appears to be a limited extent to which these are properly structured and timed to ensure that we are delivering. So the question today is, so how far, after 20 years with Africa Union Commission and AUDA NEPAD? So here are the facts. As already alluded to, the first important recognition is the AUC itself and the sister entity, AUDA NEPAD. These two are the premier institutions driving the AU agenda. They are what I've called in the past our biggest hope to really have Pan-Africanist ideals realized. So the AUC itself is structured with 9 pretty well-staffed African civil servants, some of our good brains working in actually the 9 include a big department on agriculture, rural development, blue economy, and sustainable environmental development. The second one is economic development, trade, industry, mining. The third one is education, science, technology, and innovation. Then we have infrastructure and energy. We have political affairs, peace and security. We have health, humanitarian affairs, and social development. We have women, gender, and youth. We have civil society and diaspora, and legal affairs. So you can see it is a big institution covering all key elements that apply also at national level and regional level. But before the actual establishment of the main guiding vehicle for the Africa Union Commission's agenda, the main driving continental policy framework is Agenda 2063. Now, all these 9 departments, everything that AUDA, NEPAD works on its programs, all of it is guided by AU Agenda 2063. So we're going to spend a bit of time today going through what that is, because that's what guides all this. But before the AU Agenda 2063 was adopted, in 2013 was a realization that it's 50-year anniversary of the OAU, or of African Unity, 1963 to 2013. So the 50-year anniversaries ended up with 8 key priorities they would want to see for the next 50 years, so which is what led to 2063, or AU Agenda 2063. So in 2013, at the 50th anniversary, there was a solemn declaration by the AU which covers key important agendas which are going to be seen in AU Agenda 2063. Because of their importance, I'm going to go through one at a time. There is African identity and renaissance. So the African identity and renaissance is right at the top of that list, which to me is the right thing to do. But we will see where it is placed within the AU Agenda 2063 itself. Second is continue the struggle against colonialism and right to self-determination. Once again, right up there on the list. But once again, we will need to see to what extent neocolonialism has really been diluted in Africa, or in some instances, maybe it has actually strengthened. We need to analyze that. Then there is the integration agenda. Then there's an agenda for social and economic development, peace and security, democratic governance, determining Africa's destiny and Africa's place in the world. So this solemn declaration is actually what then guided the crafting of the Africa Union Agenda 2063, as we'll see later. So let's go into the second fact, that is the AU Agenda 2063 itself. This agenda framework document was eventually adopted by the 24th session of the AU Heads of States and Government in Addis, January 2015. So it does offer the kind of strategic framework that is shared across all programs, inclusive of all those key elements from growth, sustainable development, as well as to global positioning of Africa and the use of Africa's resources for its own people. The most important elements, for those of you who have not dug into AU Agenda 2063, I would say the first thing you probably want to do when you dig into, therefore, what the real essence of the framework, you go to the aspirations. So the AU Agenda 2063 has 7 aspirations. The first one being a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. The second one, an integrated continent politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of an African Renaissance. Third, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and rule of law. The fourth is a peace and secure Africa. The fifth is Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. Sixth is an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by its African people, especially women and youth, and caring for our children. Number 7 is an Africa which is strong, united, resilient, and an influential global player and partner. Those are the 7 aspirations of the African Union in AU Agenda 2063. There's a very important publication which was put out by the AUC itself and AUDA NEPAD, which looks at how these 7 aspirations and the programs that come out of these, what has been achieved over the first 10 years. So this publication, which you will find on the internet actually, it's well publicized on the AU website. Continental progress with his aspirations, that is 2013 to 2022. So in summary, on the first aspiration that I went through with you, a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. Their estimation is we have achieved 30% of what we intended to achieve in the period. Number 2, an integrated continent, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of an African Renaissance. Well, the major thing that has happened in that area is the eventual launching of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, which then made such a huge difference to prospects for integration. And that has led the AUC and NEPAD to rate progress to 84% on that particular aspect. On the third aspiration, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and rule of law, they reckon we have achieved 42% of what we originally intended to achieve. Number 4 aspiration, a peaceful and secure Africa. And this, they used a number of actual indicators with good figures, looking at numbers of deaths from armed struggles, et cetera, and they came up with, we made 63% progress in the 10 years. Number 5 is the Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. Yeah, it's very, very moderate progress here. They concede very moderate progress, 45%, largely due to very weak integration in terms of indigenous ideals, African culture, sharing our common values, language, and the educational system, which really there's no respect for African heritage and values. So a poor 45% on that. And, you know, it's important to come back to that point when we get to discussion. Number 6 is the Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on potential offered by its African people, especially women and young people and children. They reckon progress has improved in 10 years by 67%. Then finally, in Africa, a strong, united, resilient, influential global player and partner. The Africa Union Commission and AUDA NEPAD reckon 58% improvement. They justify the 58% improvement mostly on the commitment made by the AU to fully fund its core budget, its operational budget, so that there's no donor funds going into paying for the African Union's core programs and staffing and salaries and so on. That alone has given a bit of jump in the rating of the progress. So I just given you there in summary, rating by the AUC itself on how it has performed with its sister institution, as well as the key departments over the last 10 years, 2013 to 2012. They also report that there is quite huge variance in the way the Agenda 2063 aspirations have been made by Regional Economic Commission. So if you look by region, it's quite interesting because they look at North Africa and they reckon their performance was 35% performance in progress with Agenda 2063 aspirations. West Africa, 45%. Central Africa, 42%. Southern Africa, 59%. East Africa, 53%. Needlessly for me to summarize for you to say that in the 10 years towards achieving AU Agenda 2063 aspirations, no African country has gone beyond the 50%, and quite a few, one at least in the two in the 40s, the regions I mean, yeah. In fact, one is in the 30s, North Africa. Two are in the 40s, West Africa and Central Africa, and two are in the 50s, Southern Africa and East Africa. So yeah, it's good progress, but a lot of room for improvement. Let me then turn to the implementation status of AU flagship projects. Once again, there's a report by the AUC and AUDA and NEPAD on this aspect. I actually will just for you to see and hear what these are, then you can always check for them yourselves. But I'll tell you the full list of the major flagship programs, and then we'll take a few and see how we've performed, just to encourage you to find this report for yourselves and go through this. So the 13 flagship projects of the AUC, AUDA, NEPAD include, number one, of course, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the FCFTA. Number two is the Africa Integrated High-Speed Railway Network. Three is the Pan-Afrika network. Four is Africa Commodities Strategy to see how Africa can do better on the value chains. Five is the Pan-Afrika Virtual and E-University. Six is the Grand Inga Dam Project. And seven is the Africa Passport and Free Movement of People. Eight is the silencing of guns by 2020. Nine is African financial institutions, which will mean our own continental central governments, development banks, and so on. Number 10 is Africa Outer Space Strategy. And 11 is cyber security of the continent. 12 is Encyclopedia Africana. And then 13 is a Great Museum of Africa. These are the flagship projects. And when you look at the performance of these flagship projects, there is also another publication that cuts across and looks at the aspirations as well as what's being achieved by some of these programs and give us the performance of these institutions. I will encourage you to go into these reports yourselves, especially this AUC and AUDA 2022 publication, Second Continental Report on the implementation of the Agenda 2063, implementation status of AU flagship projects. That's the name of the report. Go through that. But the performance really is also quite variable, and I'll only give you 2 to 3 out of almost 30 or so different indicators they've used here. But if you look at the aspect of high standard of living for Africans, we have dropped from 56% 10 years ago to 31% today. But on the aspect of well-educated citizens with better skills, et cetera, we have jumped from 25% 10 years ago to 44% today, and so on and so forth. So there are stats and information, but facts matter, my colleagues. Honestly, that's why I'm just giving you a taste here. There's a lot of information out there that we can analyze and see for ourselves. First and foremost, is the emphasis in the right place to achieve a really united Africa which controls its resources and is on course to being an economic superpower? Or are we kind of just hitting a shotgun approach here and there? All these things I think you can analyze for yourselves. The final program which I want to analyze in this regard as an AUC, AUDA, NEPAD program is the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, CAADP, because this is the program which African heads of states actually decided on in way back in 2003. And the African heads of states had a very simple but pretty sound premise. Africa is still very much a rural agrarian society, with 60% plus of our population still rural. We are hardly an industrialized economy. However, the future, as they saw it, started with an agricultural revolution, Africans producing volumes and volumes of food and other agricultural commodities. A well-fed people, a well-fed community, a well-fed nation is the one that can then industrialize, because you've got masses of raw materials to manufacture, to feed ourselves, for ourselves before we even start talking about export. So CAADP was envisaged as the real agenda for a long-term social and economic transformation of the continent. And CAADP has now been implemented for 20 years, because 2003, now we are in 2022. I will not, in this particular session, go into depth on CAADP, because I'm going to dedicate a full session on this, because this is where it all has to happen. And we're going to go through what has happened and the performance of 55 African countries, where we are going, and what needs to be done. So I won't go into that today, but I've whetted your appetite. I've gone through the Africa Union Commission, AUC, and then AUDA, NEPAD, all the departments, all the key programs, the flagship programs around the 7 aspirations of the Africa Union Agenda 2063. So let's come back in a minute to then go through a bit of analysis on these facts that were put on the table. See you shortly. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the analysis. You know, I went a bit overboard. I went to town on the Africa Union Commission and AUDA and NEPAD and their programs. These are the government of the Africa Union. These are the key institutions and the programs which are going to take us down the path of greatness, a great Africa, an ascending Africa, which is definitely on the path being the next superpower after US and China. So when we look at the programs, my first major issue is I still find that we need maybe to tighten the essence of what we mean by regional integration. Because regional integration, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, it's both a strategy as well as an outcome. So it's great, it's a good idea to envision a united Africa, integrated, stronger, capable of resolving our issues and driving our agenda. So as an outcome, regional integration is most desirable. But at the same time, a lot of what we're trying to achieve will be achieved faster through regional cooperation and actually cross-border strategies of building industries, of sorting out major infrastructure, and so on. So regional integration, I'm afraid, needs to be broken down into its constituents part. We need to define more clearly how the Africa Union Commission and the AUDA NEPAD programs really drive the outcomes of integrating people by also using integrative strategies as a means of operationalization. So I would just say that I see a bit of both in these programs and flagships, but it may well turn out to be that the one that was right at the top of the SOLEMN declaration in 2013 is probably now the weakest in the link, and that is really the whole drive for strong cultural integration, driving the common heritage, values and strategies. That appears to me as the weakest link in this very noble agenda. I mean, there is a clear emphasis on some of the key kind of elements to push, especially trade and development as a key element. But the structural transformation processes in individual countries and how those will accelerate change are still weakly, not strongly integrated within the continental frameworks. So I think that financial autonomy of the Africa Union and Africa Union Commission is a great leap in progress. And on that basis, I trust that the more financial autonomy the Africa Union and AUC are going to have, the less dependent we're going to be in trying to copy and paste a European Union model of regional integration. The second element I'd like to put on the table is also that the entire theory of change within the AU Agenda 2063 is there, is a well-prepared document. It actually covers lots of elements, but because it's massive, the theory of change or the impact pathways that are going to lead us from step 1, step 2, step 3 will probably need to be tightened up so that what we really see is what leads to what. For instance, I was arguing that most likely the cultural integration, identifying doing a Sankofa, looking at what is the common heritage we have in Africa, what is it that's going to unite us faster and diminish the elements that disunite us, be they political or xenophobia or whatever it is. But the cultural elements that are more likely to unite us far outweigh the negatives. And somehow we are not going back to that conversation. But the structural transformation of this continent economically, social and economic structural transformation is going to be a whole, maybe 2-3 sections on our part, because almost every African country is in a middle income trap. That's not going to be easy to come out of because of the structural faults in these economies. And I think that needs greater analysis and discussion. So I would say in terms of my analysis, I will shorten it this time around, just put those few on the table so that we can spend more time in future analyzing the performance and results of our beloved Africa Union Commission, Africa Union Development Agency, NEPAD, and all the key departments and programs who happen to be our one and only government for the continent. So thank you for listening to this analysis. We can be back shortly for the conclusion. Welcome back to the conclusion. I think the main thing I would like to put on the table for the conclusion is number one, that please let's have in our aspirations, the 7 aspirations of AU Agenda 2063, how one will see the cultural renaissance, the common heritage, the key elements that glue Africans together better so that we once again accelerate unity, accelerate speaking with one voice. I think that really should be at the top of the agenda. All the other programs should follow. And once again, in conclusion, I would say, let's be clearer in how we use regional integration, both as a vehicle as well as the outcome. Because once again, by crafting programs, strategies, projects that use integration as the way in which we are going to achieve social and economic progress, automatically lead us to greater regional integration. Whereas alternatively, we can simply say whatever we do, we want to measure at the end of it how much it provides regional integration. So the issue of all these major flagship programs, once again, could be probably all combined into 3-4 major programs with greater focus and thrust. For instance, there's definitely a cultural group of ones which cover that: education, museum, things, university. There's a lot of knowledge-based aspects there which could probably be molded into one key driving set of programs with one direction and one theory of change. Then you've got the economic ones, which include the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, the CAADP programs, and so on and so forth. So finally, the infrastructural ones, all the way from railway networks to e-networks, air transportation, etc., free movement of people. So I think maybe have fewer, more focused, or integrate these flagships into fewer, much more focused programs. So thank you very much for listening to me on this episode 13, focused on the African Union Commission and its sister institutions 10 years on. It's actually 20 years on. It was the flagship programs I was looking at 10 years on. So this is the real government. Are we moving towards the 4th stage of Pan-Africanism, where we see an African Union government down the road? Yeah, I think the jury is still out. I think the desire is there. I think at the beginning of the African Union in 2002, the drive was clearer and it was more focused. Maybe we need to refocus on those elements rather than go to them indirectly. We need, although incremental gradualism is important the way there are political and security sensitivities, but when it comes to economic advancement, how we push our agriculture, manufacturing, infrastructure, that could be a lot more aggressive. Because at the end of the day, Brand Africa is dependent on AUC and its sister institutions. AUC is critical because this is the institution which will make it possible to see even the desire of greater participation by African citizens, so that it is not just a government-to-government thing, to see ordinary citizens, our workers, scholars, activists, and more so the diaspora, driving the programs and aspirations of the Africa Union Agenda 2063. That's the way, that's the road, because remember, whether we like it or not, or whether we are aware of it or not, by 2050, Africa has the potential of being the largest economy in the world, even growing at mediocre rates of 6%. So with a much more conscious analysis and much more conscious effort, we will be the largest economy in the world by 2050 if these AUC agendas are much more consolidated and focused. Because whoever controls Africa runs the world. And we need to see how AUC and its sister institutions help us as Africans to control our resources and utilize them much more effectively and efficiently than in the past. And you can see from the statistics that they are giving that some of that is underway and has to be applauded. So once again, I think Pan Afrika is on the growth path. Once again, it just needs to be a more conscious driving of this Pan Afrika, and I definitely hope and believe that the Africa Union, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, and all the sister institutions one day will be on the table with us at DWP talking Pan Afrika. Thank you very much. See you in the next session. So my name is Mandi Rukuni. I authored this book, Being African, which I'm recommending to you. You stand a chance of winning a copy of this book in the DWP competitions. But I wrote this book primarily because we Africans often confuse Westernization with modernization. So this book goes through what it takes for us to modernize Africa using our heritage rather than Westernizing it. So Hunu, Botu, Ubuntu, Udugu is what this book is about. I recommend it to you highly, and those who want the practical side of how to succeed using heritage values, you can go to the small handbook of African Pathways to Success. Look forward to you participating in the competition. Thank you.
Stand a chance to win a copy of the book, Being African, or the booklet, African Pathways to Success, by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni, and leaving a comment on one of our recent videos. You can also like our Facebook page and comment on a recent post. If you're on Instagram, follow the profile Prof Mandi Rukuni and leave a comment on a recent post as well. A random participant will be chosen at the end of the month and will be contacted and given the book.